Then he says, and finally, the least of it is what is done out of fear of others' scornful gaze. Right? In other words, you do it, that's the least of the Riya. You do it just because you don't want people to say, you know, he's a bad person or something. So he says, it is cured by knowing that had all creation joined forces to oppose you or support you, they would not be able to without His permission, Allah. Indeed, He alone possesses rewards for your actions in your two abodes. In other words, in dunya and akhirah, it's Allah alone. It's also cured by maintaining awareness of its harm, which results in detesting it and thus causes it to pass. That is its intellectual treatment. Its practical treatment is accomplished through veiling one's actions from the eyes of others and by reciting Surah Al-Ikhlas often and say the istighfar. So this is a really important treatment here for everybody, because this disease is a serious disease and we all want to be free of it. And so the first one is doing things, veiling your actions. This does not mean that you should not do actions in front of people, but it means that you should also, out of fear of Riya, if you're able to do it when people aren't there, it's better to do it that way. So if you're going to donate money, it's better not to do it in front of people. Although, the ulama say if your intention is to encourage other people, it's a good thing. So it has to be weighed in. You have to look into your heart, what you want. If you want to show off that you're the one giving the $10,000 donation or $5,000 donation, then you do it secretly. But if you really don't feel that, you know, you want to encourage others, something like that, then it's permissible. So you have to watch your own heart and guard it. And this is a very subtle matter. So avoiding doing things, night prayers, right? Doing night prayers where people aren't going to see you, where people aren't going to reciting the Quran, doing dhikr, things like that. And even though the ulama do say that for scholars it's better to do these things also where people see them, to encourage them and to give them that. It's also a danger for people of knowledge, because they are as susceptible or often more susceptible to this disease than other people, right? Because of the nature of their position and things like that. Now the other thing is Surah Al-Ikhlas. Ikhlas, if you look at the actual meaning of the word, Ikhlas comes from a word khalusa, which means to be pure. And it relates to honey, pure honey, leban khalis, pure milk. Leban khalis is leban that has no, nothing's come into it. It's pure, right out of the udder. So it hasn't been contaminated by anything. And that's what the deen al-khalis to Allah is, that which is not contaminated with Riya. That you worship Allah and there's no contamination of Riya, of hidden shirk, of doing it for other than Allah's sake. And the mukhliseen are the people that do that. Now if you look in the Quran, there's two words that are used. Mukhlas and mukhlis. You can find them both in the Quran. The mukhlis is the active participle and the mukhlas is the passive, which indicate there has to be a tawfiq from Allah. It's not enough for you to be sincere from yourself. There has to be a tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. And that's the secret of success, is that Allah gives this tawfiq. And that's why Abu Hassan al-Shadri said, Allahumma اجعل سيئاتي سيئات المحبوب لديك ولا تجعل حسناتي حسنات المبغوض لديك. Make my bad actions the bad actions of those you love, and don't make my good actions the good actions of those you hate. Right? In other words, you have to have tawfiq from Allah. And Allah promises tawfiq if you do certain things. So it goes together. And this is why if you're a mukhlis but you're a mubtadi', you're not mukhlas. If you're sincere in your actions, like a Christian can be absolutely sincere. They can have ikhlas. Don't think they can't. You can have a sincere Christian. Really, you can have a sincere Buddhist. You can have a sincere Jew. You can have a sincere person in any tradition. but he's not mukhlas. Why? Because his action is not in accordance with what Allah wants. Did you understand the difference? So the mukhlis, who's also mukhlas, is when his action is sincere solely for the sake of Allah, and with that, he's doing what Allah loves him to be doing, not what Allah hates him to be doing. All right? So that's really important to recognize that difference. So Allah has commanded us to do things and given us a sharia. We have to follow and be in accordance with the sharia. If we're not, we don't get tawfiq. There's no tawfiq. It doesn't matter how sincere you are. Right? And I know Christians have a hard time with this. Right? Because the Christian focus is to say, the law is not really important. The important thing is the spirit of the law. No, we say both are important. One, and that's where you get the tawfiq. The tawfiq is following the law and the spirit of the law. Because you can be following the law. You're doing exactly what Allah tells you to do, but it's not for the sake of Allah. So there's Riya, غير موفق. So you're not sincere, you're not mukhlis, even though the action is in accordance with what Allah has commanded you to do. So outwardly you're praying like Allah told you 5 times a day. You're paying your zakat like Allah told you. You go on your hajj. You do all those things outwardly, everything looks good. But you're doing it for other than Allah. No tawfiq. And on the other hand, you can have inside, you're doing it sincerely and for God, right? I'm doing it for God. Charity, you do it hidden. A Christian knows about, they have these things too. They know about this, not being sincere and things like that. It's in their tradition. So there's a Christian, he's doing it, but he's not doing it in accordance with what Allah said. So you have to be with the spirit of the law, but also the letter of the law. So our deen is the middle way. The Jewish way is a focus on the law, forget the spirit of the law. The Christian way is focus on spirit of the law, forget the law. So they're both wrong. One's maghdub alayhim and the other's balin.
What was the difference between creation and
Mukhlas is a passive. And mukhlis is an active. In other words, in the mukhlas, it's Allah who's making you that way. And the mukhlis, it's coming from you. So doing Surah Al-Ikhlas, the word Ikhlas comes from akhlastu or akhlasa, which means literally to make pure. So the surah is the surah that makes you pure. The surah literally is the surah that makes you pure. Ikhlas will purify you, the surah itself. And that's why, and I put in the note there, that Murabb al-Hajj, Hafidhullah, most people that come to him with diseases of the heart, he tells them ikhlas, to do a lot of ikhlas. Surah Al-Ikhlas, including waswasa, like obsessive compulsive thought. So don't underestimate this. He's giving you a real cure here. Ikhlas is an important surah. You should say it minimum 3 times in the morning, 3 times in the evening. That's the least amount that you should say it every day. Morning 3 times, evening 3 times. It equals 1/3 of the Quran. Right? So it's a great surah. I mean, they're all great, but it has a special maqam. What's that? Yeah. He says, بِعِلْمِ أَنَّ الْخَلْقَ لَوْ تَضَافَرَ عَلَيْكَ أَوْ لَكَ أَخِي مَا قَدَرَ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِهِ وَعِنْدُهُ أُجُورٌ دَارَيْكَ وَهُوَ الْقَادِرُ الْبَرُّ الشَّكُورُ بِشُعُورِهِ ضُرُّهُ فَيُكْسِبَ ذَلِكَ بُغْضَهُ وَذَا أَنْ يَذْهَبَ دواؤه العلمي والستر العملي عن أعين الناس الدواء العملي وسورة الإخلاص في الإكثار منها ومن سيد الاستغفار. So that's the second practice to get rid of this, is to do Sayyid al-Istighfar. Sayyid al-Istighfar is there at the bottom. It comes from a hadith that's related on the authority of Burayda radiallahu anhu. It's in Imam Ahmad, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, Ibn Hibban, and Al-Hakim. So obviously it's an important hadith. It's mentioned in a lot of them. And if you do this a lot, it will also purify you from Riya. And the hadith, the Prophet said, whoever, if he rises, if he says this and in the evening, then if he dies in that day or in that evening, he'll enter Jannah. So that's a big dua. You should do it every day, 3 times a day in the morning, 3 times a day in the evening. But preferably, I would do it also after the prayers. When you finish your prayers, it's a good dua to do, any of these times, even in sajda. And it goes, Allahumma anta rabbi, Allahumma anta rabbi. Oh Allah, you are my Lord. If you want me to write the phonetic, do some people want the phonetics? Alright. Allahumma anta rabbi la ilaha illa anta kharaqtani. وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت أبوء لك بنعمتك علي وأبوء بذنبي فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. خلاص. This is really a cure. I guarantee you. Try it on yourself. He's not making this stuff up. This is a science. Do what he's telling you to do, and you'll get it. Say in every day, say that dua. Every evening, say that dua. Do Surah Al-Ikhlas. Right? Really do it with the intention of ikhlas. Ya Allah, akhlasni liwajhika al-kareem. Do it. Say it to Allah alone in the night. Get up. Ya Allah. Allah can do that. And if you do it with sincerity, He'll do it. But, if it's all just like, oh, okay, and what's next? What's the next disease? I mean, this is serious stuff. This is our lives, this is serious stuff. This is our life. I take this stuff really seriously because it scares me. I read this stuff. I read Imam al-Ghazali's signs of insincere preachers and sincere preachers. And I'll tell you, I saw more stuff on the insincere side. And it really frightened me. You read this stuff, this is the danger of this science. You start reading it and you start seeing yourself in it. And it's unnerving because we're going to be taken into account for all this. Right? This is what life is about. And either we get the point or we don't. But the point is, we've been given a huda. This is guidance. And we're being told. Now another thing, which is a really important dua to do. Right? And he doesn't mention it in here, but Sidi Ahmed Zarruq mentions it in the Nasiha. And it's a great dua. It's from our Prophet ﷺ, so it has to be great. But to do this 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening. This is prescription drugs, right?
With no side effect.
No side effect. No, it has primary effect. Oh Allah, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika an ushrika bika wa ana a'lamu. I seek refuge in you, that I should associate with you and I know it. In other words, shirk, Riya. This is a dua for isti'adha min al-Riya. And the Prophet ﷺ did that. So, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika an ushrika bika وأنا أعلم. وأستغفرك من كل. And there's a riwayah مما لا أعلم. The one Sidi Ahmed Zarruq gives is من كل ما وأستغفرك من كل ما لا أعلم. So this says, "Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you that I should make shirk with you. Ushrika bika wa ana a'lamu." And I know about it, which is Riya. That is Riya. Wa astaghfiruka min kulli ma la a'lamu. And I ask forgiveness for anything that I'm not aware of. Because there's shirk that you are not even aware of. In other words, Riya is very subtle, and it gets more and more subtle as the more you work on yourself. All right? So, and I mentioned the story, one of the Salaf used to pray for 40 years. He prayed every day in the first line, and one day he was late, and he didn't want to go in because he didn't want people to see him in the later lines. And he said that he realized 40 years he was just showing off. And so he repeated all of his prayers for 40 years. Now the ulama use that example just to say, you know, sayyat hasanat al-abrar, sayyat al-muqarrabin. The good actions of righteous people are the bad actions of people that are in the presence of Allah. So it just gets finer and finer. And so I wouldn't, you know, I mean, what we really worried about is literally we're conscious of it. And we just have to ask Allah to forgive us for anything we're not conscious of. And that's what this dua is. And it's from the Prophet ﷺ. So in it is a shifa. وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. We reveal in this Quran what is a shifa, a healing for the hearts, and a rahmah. Right? Shifa'un lima fi sudur. Right? It's a shifa for what's in the hearts. The Quran is a shifa. وَنَشْفِي صُدُورَ قَوْمٍ مُؤْمِنِينَ. And we cure, Allah says, nishfi صُدُورَ وَيَشْفِي, the Quran, وَيَشْفِي صُدُورَ قَوْمٍ مُؤْمِنِينَ. And the Quran cures the hearts of believing people. Right? So, the heart can be cured, and this is one of the du'as, because the Quran tells us to وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. What the Prophet gave you, take it. So he gave us this, so it's a really good du'a to do every day, at least 3 times a day. And then he says, and this is really, look at this, he says, لِزَمْنِ الْقَلْبِ مِنَ الرِّيَاءِ يُلْفَى دَوَاءً أَيَّمَا دَوَاءِ. As for the chronically diseased heart that results from constantly showing off by doing good works, even it will find a cure in this. And what a cure. So he's letting you know this is a serious treatment for this disease. All right, so people believe it and practice it, and inshallah you'll see the results of it, bi'idhnillah. And then he says, أَمَّا الرِّيَّا بِسَتْرِ ذَنْبٍ أَوْ خَنَا فَوَاجِبٌ كَمَا إِبْنُ زُكْرِ بَيَّنَا. He's saying, as for hypocrisy, and here Riya is closer to a type of hypocrisy that relates to veiling your wrong actions, hiding your faults. This type of Riya is a Riya that is wajib, according to Ibn Zukri. In other words, if somebody says to you, did you ever drink alcohol? You say, I never drank alcohol. If somebody asks you, did you ever steal? And you made tawbah from that, then you say, no, I never did that. He's saying that that's something that's not Riya. That's actually that's actually really important. It's a wajib. It's not considered a lie by Sharia. And I'll tell you why. My note there is that this is in fact a type of Riya if the person desires others to consider him better than he is by concealing his misdeed from them. In other words, it becomes Riya when you're doing it because you want people to think you're better than you really are. But it is an obligation to conceal one's wrongdoing, not for this reason, but so that misdeeds are not taken lightly by the community. Because you see, if I don't know that you've drinking alcohol, and I say, have you ever had alcohol? And you say, yes. I say, oh, then I'm not that bad, you know. You see, it kind of, it lessens the whole enormity. Because kabira means enormity. The word in English language, enormity, means a great evil. It's very similar to kabira. Kabira is an enormity. You don't want to make little of enormities. You want the society to actually respect. And I just added in there that although, because if people freely admit their transgressions, this leads to complacency and lack of shame. And although there's an obvious hypocrisy inherent in this, it is really a type of homage that vice pays to virtue, in order that virtue can act as a deterrent to the inurement of deviation in the social arena. In other words, you know, vice, in a healthy society, virtue is the norm, is the ma'ruf, and vice is the munkar. In an unhealthy society, the opposite occurs. So when you have a healthy society, vice has to pay homage to virtue by hiding itself. Do you see? So it's really, it's not a hypocrisy, it's a respect for virtue. And that's why the Sharia is honoring it. And the danger, see, this is what like Freud said. Now, this is all hypocrisy, and really you're all seething with sexual lusts and with desire and all these things. So just let it all come out and you'll be healthy. And now, you know, welcome to 1998, right? Seriously. Where it's all, I mean, unbelievable. Newsweek, you can't really even read it now. It's the last few issues are unbelievable. The stuff, there's no shame. None. I mean, this guy Will, writing, it's pornographic. And he's like a conservative commentator for Time or Newsweek or something. And there's no shame, because they're no longer paying homage to virtue. They don't even have the shame to hide it all. It's all like, the problem here is not what he was doing in the room. That's all fine. There's no, we all this, no big deal. The problem is he lied about it. I mean, this is really the whole, you know, so it's become all sick and perverse. And even some people are saying, well, big deal, everybody lies about that. You know, it's not like lying about something really big. But it is big, it's an enormity. How did it become such an insignificant thing? Because in this culture, in the 1960s, in most cities in the United States, if 1960s people, if an unmarried girl got pregnant, she disappeared. She disappeared from the community. And about 7 or 8 months later, she showed up again. And they say, oh, well, she went off, you know, to stay with her grandparents. What she did was they sent her to a place to have her baby, and then they put the baby up for adoption. She came back into the community and nobody knew about it, because there was shame. That's 1960s. You know, seriously, that's not that long ago. In 1968, a woman was kicked out of Radcliffe for living with a man in the same apartment. 1968, Radcliffe was at that time still considered a reasonably radical place. And they kicked the girl out for living. Now there's co-ed dorms. I mean, it's no, who cares? So how did it get from, it got from that by having big deal. Who cares? Belittling it. So Islam says, no, it's better to have that hypocrisy, because what it is really, it's honoring virtue. That's the important thing. It's not that there's that hypocrisy. That's seen as less harmful than what happens when it's all let it all hang out type attitude. You know, big deal. That is what's dangerous, not the hypocrisy. And this again is the idea in Sharia of lesser of the two evils. They're both evil. You can see that. Obviously nobody wants to be a hypocrite or tell lies or say, no, I never did something and you did it. But the point is, the Sharia is saying there's a greater evil in saying that you did it, because it's going to lessen the impact of the action when other people start saying, oh, he's doing that too, or oh, he did it. Oh, well, maybe it's not, you know, that bad. So instead of having that attitude, no, of course not, I would never do that. Because there's a shock. Seriously, it's not, this is really serious stuff. And this is how the Muslims viewed the world, right? Is that what there was shame, right?
Because you're saying the intention of the Shwari. I mean, you're not lying to show yourself as a better person.
Right. What you're doing is you're trying to, what you're doing is you're recognizing you don't want this other person to lessen their fear and their disgust in the wrong action. That's the important thing. Well, see, even Imam Junaid, and I really think this is a healthy opinion. Imam Junaid said, if you do a wrong action and you make tawbah, forget it. Don't dwell on it. Have a fear of returning to it, but don't dwell on it. Because what that does, it results in guilt. It results also in a type of despair, and it results in a feeling of self-loathing, right? And you really shouldn't. Those aren't healthy feelings. They're not. If you make tawbah, astaghfirullah, and make a sincere tawbah, don't return to it, and then just forget about it, like it never happened, right? And that is a
What if it's the big one, like a river or something like that, and so you can't get out of it, and therefore you're in a state of disbelief?
Well, you're not. If somebody's in an enormity like riba, that's not kufr. It is an enormity, and it's a bad one, and it shouldn't be taken lightly at all. But it doesn't take you out of the pale of Islam. You're still within the fold of Islam. It's an enormity. If you've gotten yourself into that situation and it's not easy to get out of it, right? Then you have to make tawbah and do whatever you have to do to get out of it. In other words, begin that process and make the tawbah, get out of it. Once you're out of it, you make, khalas. Tatub ila Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And tawbah has to be sincere. And the signs of sincerity is real remorse. You have nadama, that you leave it immediately, and you make the intention never to return to it. If you do that, khalas, that's a tawbah, and you should have a good opinion of Allah when you make tawbah. Like, I'm so horrible, I'm miserable, Allah will never forgive me. No, Allah tells us not to think like that. And that's like a Christian disease. A lot of Christians fall into that despair. It's interesting, there's a lot of complexity in Christianity, because they do have that tendency, and then the other tendency, like the Baptists, in Baptist Christianity, you can be the most outrageous person and really completely be convinced you're saved. And there's Baptists that are like that. That's why Baptist ministers, it's kind of this notorious thing, the Jimmy Swaggart syndrome, is that they really can do these horrible things and then get back up on the pulpit, and it's not a shock to Baptists. It's because devil got you that time, you'll get him the next time,
So, you used to make help or you been before?
Al-Islam yajubu ma qablahu. Islam is tawbah. Islam is the tawbah of a non-Muslim from his kufr. And that by consensus is accepted. When you make tawbah as a non-Muslim by entering Islam, by the ijma' of the ummah, all of your wrong actions are forgiven. Nothing remains. It's like the day you were born. By consensus. Whereas the tawbah of a Muslim, khilaf. In other words, if Allah wants, He can accept it. If He doesn't, He can reject it. But you should have a hope that He does, because we have raja. But don't be absolutely certain. In other words, that'll put your fear in you from not returning to it another time. All right? I think inshallah, we can stop there.
I heard people say that when we kick shahada that all your bad deeds become good deeds. Is that correct?
No, but all your good deeds come with you into Islam. Your bad deeds are wiped out. Yeah, but the good deeds come with you. So anything you did good before Islam, it comes with you into Islam. That's why you don't lose anything, you just gain.
Speaking good.
And I don't understand how it would come from Allah.
That's a really good point. we don't say that Allah brings evil, but we say that Allah, within the decree of Allah is good and evil. In other words, Allah has measured out good and evil. It's going to exist. But the hadith, the Prophet's dua of the Prophet, he said, "Al-khayru kulluhu bayna yadayk, wa-sharru la ya'udu ilayk." All of good, it comes from you, and evil does not return to you. So while Allah has created a world in which He has allowed evil to exist, we don't attribute evil to Allah, even though we believe that it is Allah who measured it out. In other words, Allah has given... See, evil can only exist, interestingly enough, with human beings. It can't exist in the animal kingdom. It can't exist... If a lion eats a baby, it's not an evil act. There's no moral compunction there for the lion not to eat the baby. Right? You cannot say the lion is an evil lion. You can't say the cobra is an evil cobra if it bit... Because it's just a snake, it's just doing what it's created to do, right? But if a human being takes a gun and goes out and robs somebody of his hard-earned money and then shoots him, robbing is an evil, and then shooting him on top of that for no reason is another heinous evil. Now, what we say is that Allah created the human being and gave him the ability to choose, and then measured out for him what he was going to choose. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has measured out that person would at that point choose to do that act. And he's fully responsible for it. And Allah allowed him to do that. In other words, empowered him to do it. Because it was Allah's qudra that enabled him to carry out the act. And it was Allah's mashi'ah, right? His providence and His will that allowed that person to will what he wants. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. You don't will anything except Allah wills it at the same time. I wanted to do, like I wanted to go and do something harmful to somebody over here. And I start walking, now my mashi'ah has started. But if Allah doesn't want harm to come to that person, right, and the person gets a heart attack, drops dead on the way, He wills something, but Allah didn't will it. So anything that you actually do can only be done if Allah wills it as well. And that is when, now, when it's tawfiq, when what you will is what Allah loves, and it's khudlan, when what you will is what Allah hates. Do you understand? So Allah is the muwaffiq and He's the khadil. But you're ultimately the one who is doing the evil. We don't attribute the evil to Allah, but we admit that Allah has measured it out in the world. It's part of the qadr of Allah. Allah has allowed evil to exist in the world. It's part of His creation, exactly.
And then in the act of which is bad, it doesn't be evil. Well, not it doesn't evil, but
The consequences of our actions.
We're responsible for them.
Whether-
Absolutely, yeah. Whether it's evil or good. But it's Allah's qadr. He measured it out. In other words, without Him creating a world in which human beings could choose good or evil, no evil could exist. So ultimately you say, had Allah not willed it, there would be no evil. But it doesn't return to Him. We don't attribute it to Him. You see what I mean?
How do you know that there is a rida of Allah in your action and a quzum of Allah? So what?
How do you know that there is Allah, like will your will and Allah's will at that particular moment if I do an action is there?
Is it's in the Sharia. If it's not in correspondence with Sharia, then there's no tawfiq. But if what you're doing is done with ikhlas, sincerity, and it's in accordance with Allah's laws, then there's tawfiq. That is tawfiq. That's what muwaffaq means. Somebody who their actions, what they will is what Allah loves them to do.
But the everyday life, whenever you want to do something, you don't know Sharia view of everything you're doing.
You should. وَيُقِفْرُ أُمُورَ حَتَّى يَعْلَمَ مَا اللَّهُ فِيهِنَّ بِهِ قَدْ حَكَمَ. Ibn Ashir, he stops everything until he knows what the hukm of Allah is. You should never engage in anything that you don't know what Allah has willed in it, has decreed. It's haram to do anything that you don't know the hukm of Allah. And thank goodness, the vast majority of things are permissible. And there's only a small group of things that are haram, and you have to learn them. It's pretty simple. Wallahi, Allah didn't make the deen hard. I'm serious. The deen is not difficult. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. The problem is, human beings just, they don't want to do these things. Taqwa is very simple. Taqwa is 4 things. Taqwa is doing what Allah commanded you inwardly and outwardly. Inwardly with ikhlas, outwardly in accordance with His laws. Right? That's the first 2 parts. The second 2 parts is not doing what He told you not to do inwardly and outwardly. Leaving it not out of fear that somebody's going to see you going into the bar, right? Out of fear of Allah, right? That's inwardly with ikhlas. And outwardly, not doing it, whether you're alone or whatever. And that's all taqwa is. And if you have taqwa, Allah promises you every good in this world. He promises you makhraj. He promised that He'll rectify your children. He promised you He'll forgive your wrong actions. He promised you that He'll open up the gates of the heavens and rain and give you good agriculture. He promises you that you'll have a good life, hayat tayyibah. He promises you all these dunya things, and then He promises you other worldly things. He promises you that He'll forgive you, that He'll enter you into paradise, that He'll put you in the company of the nabiyyin, the prophet, the siddiqeen, the righteous people, the shuhada, the martyrs, and the salihin. I mean, what a deal. What a bargain.
Is there any blame on the person who asked the better lesson?
Yeah, it's not a good thing to do. It's called ihraj. Ihraj, the Arabs, ihraj is when huh? Yeah, it's like putting somebody in an embarrassing type, and particularly about wrong action, not a good thing. It's again, that's muru'ah. And it's also, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Min husni Islam al-mar'i farkuhu ma la ya'ni." From the good Islam, the beautiful Islam of a person is to leave what doesn't concern him. It's no concern of yours what he does in between him and Allah. And it's better not to know it, because one, you'll think badly of. I mean, Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, they asked him how old you were. He said, "Ya'nik," is it any concern of yours? And he was asked about that, and he said, look, if you tell them your age, either they'll say, "Oh, I thought you were older," and so they belittle you, or they say, "Oh, I thought you were younger," right? So you can't win.
What about in the given matter?
No, that's different, because there's a concern. Right? I mean, if you're getting married, there is a concern, and age is one of the concerns of marriage. It's a perfectly valid reason for a man to be concerned about the age of a woman, because there's things that relate to marriage in that, and also the woman with the man. That's why it's not permissible, for instance, to dye your hair. If you have gray hairs, and go and dye your hair and then go to the woman and present yourself as a shab, and then she marries you, and suddenly, she starts seeing the roots, right?
That can be drug provided in it.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a big problem. And vice. That is a really major problem, because obviously in traditional cultures, people knew good people, good family from bad families. I mean, it was just a known, In most Muslim cultures, a good family, you just knew that they weren't doing bad stuff. Unfortunately, now that is no longer true. Good family, bad family, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of people that have fornicated. There's a lot of people that have taken alcohol, taken drugs, taken things. And especially nowadays, it's very serious, because there's diseases that relate to this. There's a lot of repercussions in that. And so I think that, there's a valid concern there. Well, it depends on, what it relates to. I mean, I think in terms of zina, people have a right to know if they're getting into a marriage, the condition of. Now, in Sharia, the verse, that a fornicator can only marry a fornicator, right? Or the polytheist. That has to do with before Tawbah. In other words, the Baghiya was a woman who would just sell herself in the marketplace, and it was prohibited to marry somebody like that if that was their condition. If they made Tawbah, then there's no prohibition against it. But, that's something that people have the right, I think, in relation to the situation that we're in